Have you ever wondered how massive enterprise systems are built and where you fit in as a developer? Think of it like building a skyscraper, each stage carefully planned from foundation to final features. In this video, we'll break down how these systems come together and how developers collaborate, test, and deploy to different environments. So let's dive in. So obviously, to start with, for you to come up with a system, there must be an idea behind it. So we are going to have a scenario where we are going to be building an ordering system where you have the business, which is the client, and the business, the other tech company or a startup which is going to be building the software. So what do these two do then? They sit together, they analyze all the features that the customer wants. So we are talking about, we have a business analyst, we have a project manager, and we're also probably going to be having a scrum master, but this depends with the size of the team. Some teams, they only have a business analyst and a project manager, then some they also have scrum masters and stuff, right? So these two entities, they sit together, they now agree to say, okay, fine, the features that you guys want us to build, they are okay, we are capable of building those. Then now they start bringing in developers. So when they bring in developers, there'll be communication between the business analyst and the developers, right? Now we're talking about analyzing all the features, sizing them. And now one thing that you need to know is that there is going to be a project management too. So here I'm talking about either Azure DevOps or Jira or any other platform that, you know. So these platforms, what they do is we record everything that has to do with the software that we're building in that platform, right? So this entails from features that we're going to be building, the environments, configuring these environments that we're going to be building, the repositories, also the tasks, you know, the sprints. How is our project going to run for? Like, how long is it going to run for? And we also have what we call backlogs, where we keep all the other features that we're not yet developing in. So now let's say we have the developers now, right? So now we create what we call repositories, making use of Git. So what is Git, right? So Git is a tool that is used to bring collaboration between developers. This manages our source code. It manages everything that has to do with the source code, sharing the source code, reviewing and seeing who did what on that specific source code. So whenever you create a repository, you get a main branch, right? So then from that main branch, you are going to be creating an extra branch, which is the develop branch. This is now a separate branch where the developers will be playing in that, right? It's not for deploying to the production. So now, why do we keep these two branches separated or isolated? The reason is that we always want to keep the main or the master branch as clean as possible. It will be ready for deployment, right? So whenever we want to do a deployment, we push from the main branch, right? Now, we have created these repositories, right? It's time now to start building the application. So we have what we call sprints. So what a sprint is, it contains all the tasks that we are going to be working on for a specific period of time. So for example, most companies or most developers, they make use of 2 weeks as the duration of their sprint. So now we're going to have the dev 1 and the dev 2 performing in this sprint, right? So each developer is going to pick a feature that they're going to be focusing on. So let's say developer 1 is going to be tackling authentication and creating orders, then the other developer will do payment and tracking, right? Now, so once a developer is done be doing unit test, right? Now they want to commit or they want to share their source code or push it back into what we call the develop branch. So there are certain commands or main commands that most developers use. So we have the git pull, where you're pulling or you're fetching all the the source code into your workspace. We also have the Git fetch. We also have the Git commit. This is where now you're saving whatever work that you have done. You're committing it into a remote branch or your workspace. It's more like saving, right? Then we have the Git push. So Git push is now you're sharing that source code into a develop branch or into a main branch, which is a remote, such that all other developers can also have access to what you have been working on, right? Back to the feature branches, right? I've done my feature branch. Now I create what we call a pull request. So before I merge anything to the develop branch, I create a pull request, and that pull request goes through what I call code reviews. So code reviews is when another developer comes and inspects whatever that you have worked on, just to make sure that you have followed good standards, that you in your team have agreed on, everything is working fine, the syntax is fine, all those things. So now let's say there's something wrong within your pull request or your code that you have just compiled. Then your peers or whoever is doing your code reviews will sit with you, they will tell you, or they even write comments, right, to say you need to fix this. Then you fix that, you recreate or you save or you regenerate that pull request, then another review happens again. Now if everything is fine, now we're ready to merge to the develop branch. So the same thing will happen to our dev too, right? You do the same pull request, get reviewed, then now when everything has been reviewed, now we merge to the develop branch, right? So now we're pushing everything to the develop branch. Now after we have pushed to the develop branch, it's now time to come up with the builds, the release pipelines, right? So we make use of continuous integration or continuous delivery. So this helps us to automate the way we make our builds, the way we do our release pipelines, or when we want to deploy to any environment. Instead of doing manually, these management tools that we make use of, it's an inbuilt feature that comes within it. So we are going to be utilizing those, setting up the environments, configuring everything that needs to be, so that we just automate the whole process. Now it's time to introduce you to the environment. So depending again with the client or your team or the company that you're working in, so these are all now environments where they're servers, right? So if your company doesn't have much money, it means you're probably going to just have few servers, or your client vice versa. So now we are going to have a development environment, a QA environment, a UAT environment, and a production environment. And all these environments, they can be isolated if you want, right? The best is to isolate. So in where I come from, we have isolated environments, but our production environment is way too isolated. So we don't want anything or any noise within our production environment. So now the developing environment, this is where now it's your playground as developers. You deploy all features, you test and see, okay, everything is fine, right? So now we push it to development. Now comes the QA environment. This is where an environment where your testers, your software testers, they go into they now test all the features that you have done, right? Now if anything is wrong, if whatever that you have pushed is not meeting the requirements, then they will report to say, guys, we have found out, or we have picked up a bug, you need to fix it. So when you're fixing it, the developers, they take that bug, or they analyze the bug, create a branch for it, they fix the branch, then the pull requests come in, the code reviews, that whole process happens again, then eventually it gets pushed back to the environment. Now if everything is working fine in the QA environment, we've met the standards or we've met the requirements, we now push it to a UAT environment. Some call it a UAT, some call it a staging environment. For me, any naming is fine, because what you just need to know is why is it there. So this environment is there in the sense that you now need to go and probably do a demo to your client, or you need to make them play around with what you've developed so far, so that they've passed, they're happy, right? So the business now plays in this environment, checks everything, to say, okay, the system that we requested for is working fine, and they give you a pass, right? So if they give you a pass, then you're good to go. If they don't, then you need to fix up until everyone is happy, then you move on. Now let's say for instance they are happy, everything is working fine. Now you need to create another pull request from develop branch, because remember, this is an environment or a branch where it contains the source code which has been agreed to be working. So you create a pull request from there, it goes under review, then it gets merged into the main branch or the master branch, right? Then from the master branch, we then activate the build and also the pipeline, right? Now we are ready to be deploying to the production environment. And as you know, the production environment is the live environment. This is all the other applications that you see on Google. They are now, that's the live environment. You get to play with it. So your client gets to play with the system, passes it to its customers, they get to access the web application and so forth. Now this is the most, or I would say in a nutshell, this is how these systems that you see out there are developed. So you can have many developers. So some teams, they have many developers, many teams of developers, and these processes, this is the basic how they do it, right? Obviously things will differ with the company, but mostly that's how they do it. Now let's look at how the actual software, probably the architecture or the blueprint of how whatever that you're developing, how it fits in the whole production environment. So you're going to have a client app, right? So this is where the site where your users access the whole system from. So it can be a web app, it can be a mobile application. Then you also have the backend API. This is where all the business logic is, right? Then you have your database to store whatever data, to retrieve data and so forth. So your customers or your client customers, they access the application via the internet, which is you'll be sending HTTPS requests which are secure to the backend. The backend does the whole logic, analyzing whatever requests that are coming in, passes it or retrieve information from the database, then sends response to the front end, then the user eventually get to see it, right? So this is in a nutshell how these large enterprises are built. Obviously I have left out the non-functional specs or the non-functional aspects. So this is it, guys. This is all that I had with me today. If you have enjoyed and if you have found this video useful to you, please give it a thumbs up, and also if you have anything or if you feel like I've left out something, please write it in the comments down below. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in the next one.